Hello and welcome to Autology, the weekly podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week's episode is called Graphene in Automotive, Part 2, and as you can guess, is a continuation of last week's podcast on this topic. And you're here again with me, Anna Büttner and Edwin Pope, Principal Analyst for Vehicle Dynamics and Materials, alongside our special guest, Terrance Barkan, Executive Director of the Graphene Council.
What hurdles to adoption remain then for the automotive supply chain? If you could maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I can try to address that. One is just perception. Because graphene received so much attention when it first came out in 2004 and the Nobel Prize was awarded in 2010, a lot of folks did say, hey, let me try this. I want to see how it works. And frankly, they got really bad results. They got bad results because maybe the material they got wasn't even graphene at that time, which is likely. Also, we didn't know very much about the need for dispersion or how to do the dispersion correctly. So there's a whole host of reasons why people got negative results when they first tried it and they soured on the material. Fast forward to today, and production quantity and quality has vastly improved. The price has come down. And so the existing perceptions are now out of date. That's one. The other one is just the time it takes to get a new material into the production cycle. And, this isn't on the backs of the OEMs from our perspective. This is all the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers who need to get comfortable with the material. So people are really risk averse in going with a new material when they don't fully understand it and they're not sure what the impacts are. And that just takes time and education.
Sounds like a little bit of risk allowance there too, right? What about modeling? You hear about composites being, the super cute computer elephant in the room. When I've talked to a couple suppliers, one in particular, I won't name them in case they're listening. They talked about actually having supercomputer that they bought from a government, and that's how they model their composite. Is graphene helping that cause, or is it still the proverbial need of more compute power for the?
There is work being done on modeling these materials, because if you think about what it actually is, and there are many more two-dimensional materials beyond just graphene, right? You've got hexagonal boron nitride or molybdenum disulfide and these other 2D materials that are equally interesting and often used in combination with graphene, or the transition metal dichalcogenides or MAXenes, max phase materials. These are all 2D materials that you can literally build atom layer upon atom layer to make heterostructures and devices. So there is modeling for that to see, which of these materials would be compatible with one another. With graphene and HBN, one's an insulator, one's electrically conductive. So you can start, building circuits with this at the atomic level. Incredibly small, incredibly robust. The short answer, yes, there is work being done on that. It's not yet to the point where, you can plug in some parameters and then the output says, use, 3 atoms of graphene to every 1,000 atoms of X. But there is modeling, and some of our member companies are working on that. The other thing I'd say about the Graphene Council and the community we have, of the 35,000 materials professionals and scientists that we connect, about 10,000 are academic, university-based, mostly postdocs, who are working with this material and doing a lot of the research and development of how to apply these materials. So that they're all within our community. So we go from in the lab, university, original research, all the way through to the end user who's applying graphene in their products.
So just a quick napkin map here. You said 20 or 35,000 members, 10,000 of them are students, academics, PhDs, so forth. So 25,000 active members who are, let's say, industry professionals. Does that represent a pretty good number of suppliers that may be able to go to these tier 1 and tier 2? Because I know risk in supply chain is pretty hot topic these days.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the vast majority of those people that we have in our community are R&D professionals in commercial companies. And then on the production side, we monitor no less than 300 companies that proclaim to make graphene, of which 200 are what we would call commercial ready or in the commercial side, as opposed to, let's say, bench scale or pilot. It's really small pilot scale. And then within that, we have core members of the Graphene Council that are full commercial producers. They can make more than a ton of this a year, which is a heck of a lot of material when you're using such a small percentage of it. And then we also have verified graphene producers. Now, these are companies that we, as the Graphene Council, have gone to their production facilities on site all around the world and viewed their production facilities, their health and safety protocols, their quality control protocols. And then we've audited their material where we've taken a sample, then had it fully characterized in a third-party lab blind study. And what we verify then is that these companies can make what they say they make, and they can make it in the volumes they claim. And that's really important for the supply chain, is to have that kind of validation where you actually lay eyes on the enterprise and you're looking at their processes, auditing their material, and validating their claims.
Sounds like you're taking the approach like aluminum or steel or magnesium or any other family of, let's say, material type, where there's, subcategories. In the case of, aluminum, it's alloys. In the case of steel, it's still alloys, but typically they break it into grades. Same thing with, magnesium. So is this, more or less how, say, the conventional listeners can wrap their head around that?
Well, we're getting there. We're not quite there yet because graphene is a new material and there are a lot of forms of it. But here's what we are doing. We've written what's called the Graphene Classification Framework, which is a methodology to differentiate one type of graphene from another, which has now been licensed to ISO, and it will become an ISO technical specification. So that's already done. The next step for us is we're working through ISO, or rather we're working through ASTM in the Engineered Carbons Committee. And we're defining exactly what you kind of mentioned, the different groupings of types and forms of graphene, so that an engineer can say, I want ASTM number XYZ type graphene. Now, I want to emphasize, this will not commoditize this material. It still should be thought of more like a specialty chemical that needs to be tuned to the specific application. If you're looking for heat transfer or strength or electrical conductivity, it will dictate what type of material you need. But at least we have a way for the consumer to understand, okay, from this producer, I'm getting this type of graphene, and that producer makes a different type, and you know what the differences are. So our role as a neutral trade body is to bring transparency and trust to this market through all of the actions we have, including the standardization and then the categorization of the different types or families of graphene material. And for that, we're going through ASTM's Engineered Carbons division.
All right, very good. One topic we haven't touched on really that I'd like to bring up is sustainability, as it is very important. So I'd like to ask this, does graphene have any synergies with corporate initiatives such as sustainability?
Anna, that's a really, really good question. And it's a very topical one because people are saying, well, how are we using carbon to get rid of carbon kind of thing, right? So with graphene, there are multiple ways of making it, including from waste streams. This would include waste products out of the oil and gas industry, from the coal industry, from agricultural waste. All these are sources of carbon that can be turned into a useful product instead of waste. So that's one thing, is taking even waste gases like methane gas and capturing that and then turning it into graphene. And in some cases, graphene and hydrogen, right? So beneficial products that we can use. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that graphene makes the original material more durable, which means it has a longer life. So that's already a sustainable aspect. And then another really important aspect is, let's say, plastics and recycling. So we all know that if you recycle a plastic, it doesn't perform quite to the same level as the virgin material. And there's only so many times that a plastic can go through those different recycling processes before it degrades to the point you have to put it into a waste stream. What graphene can do is to take that waste plastic that can no longer be recycled and bring it back to where it can be used again by adding strength and other performance to it that you would otherwise not have had. So that's just a few, right? From taking waste material and turning them into productive material of graphene, to making original products more durable so they last longer and don't need to be replaced as often, to recycling unrecyclable material and putting it back into useful production. These are just three really key ways that graphene helps with that life cycle.
Does that apply to chopped fibers or anything else to go into composites? Are any of those activation sites helping get to isotropic behavior? And is it, getting us to a point where, maybe in some of these, SMCs or something like that, we can see a significant enough performance bump to where maybe it's a bit more widely accepted? Is that kind of another angle of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where you're taking a material with the chopped fiber example, right? So you have a difference in performance from, let's say, a long fiber or a virgin fiber. So anything you can do to elevate its performance makes it competitive, right? So yeah, the short answer for that's absolutely yes.
Cool. Well, maybe that and some of the international sources will let us be, maybe a little bit more bio feedstock heading into all this. And maybe you guys will actually figure out a pathway to carbon negativity, something of that nature.
Well, I think we're well on the way to that. And right now, the global production capacity for graphene is about 15,000 metric tons a year. But we looked at, if you put graphene just into, let's say, EV batteries as an anode material, even for a relatively small percentage of the units made, let's say 3 million cars a year. For 3 million cars, you're going to need about 100,000 metric tons of graphene for enhanced batteries. So there's going to be a big demand for graphene. We think in the next 3 to 5 years, that could easily be between 3 to 500,000 metric tons between batteries, coatings, plastics, elastomers, and even concrete. In fact, the Graphene Council is going to go one level below the automotive sector to asphalt. So we're running a comparative testing program with the NCAT, with the National Center for Asphalt Technology in the United States, which is used by a lot of the DOTs to even make the asphalt the cars run on better and longer lasting.
That'd be great here in Michigan where potholes, can swallow, man. I guess that's good for all the Detroit Metro people here, and that maybe we'll actually get some better rates out of all this, in addition to making the cars a little better. So yeah,
Great. Let's hope for that then. Yes, thank you to both of you. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. A big thank you to you both for joining Autology.
My pleasure, Anna and Ed. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for running that, Donna, as usual. And thanks, Terrance, for having a good open discussion today.
My pleasure.
Yes, yes, indeed. And thank you to all you listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@spglobal.com email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcast. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye for now.